The day began grey with dense clouds covering the sky, perfectly reflecting Clara's state of mind. She sat on the wooden bench in the small park near her home, her fingers intertwined in her lap, breathing slowly, as if each breath could contain all the pain she felt. At 19, life should have seemed full of possibilities, but for Clara, the world was closed like a locked door. She had just received another cold letter from her father, a millionaire who rarely acknowledged her except when he needed a perfect family facade. The letter said in short, curt lines that he had no time for her, that her presence was an inconvenience, that her life decisions were not hers, and that he expected her to learn to fend for herself. She already knew every word by heart. Each sentence burned inside her chest like acid. She stood up, the icy wind making her hair cling to her face, and began walking aimlessly, each step echoing in her heart the feeling of rejection she had carried since childhood. She remembered the lavish parties, the expensive gifts, the fake smiles of guests pretending to like her, but he was always distant, almost a stranger, and at every birthday, every graduation, he seemed more interested in his own image than in his daughter. The phone rang, breaking the silence that enveloped Clara. It was her mother trying to comfort her with words that no longer found room in her wounded heart. She hung up without saying anything, only feeling the anger and sadness mix in a seemingly endless storm. But there was something inside her, a spark of resilience that never completely extinguished. Clara took a deep breath, trying to remember who she was outside the shadow of an absent father. She had learned to fend for herself, to juggle temporary jobs, to save every penny to protect herself from a life that seemed decided by others. And in that moment, she made a silent promise to herself. No matter how much he rejected her, no matter how cold his fortune, she would find her own way. The city moved around her, indifferent to her pain. People hurried across the street, cars honked, the world went on. But for Clara, every step was a challenge, every look a reminder of what she'd never had, unconditional love. And it was then, through tears that wouldn't fall, that she realized something that would change everything. Life couldn't wait for his recognition. She needed to start living now, even if the world couldn't see her, even if no one believed her. She took a deep breath and, for the first time in a long time, smiled faintly. A small smile, almost imperceptible, but filled with strength. Clara knew the road would be long, full of obstacles, but finally she felt that the direction was hers, that every decision would be hers to make, that every achievement would be won with her own hands. And in that silent decision, the first step toward freedom began. Clara woke the next morning with the strange feeling that something was about to change. The modest room she was renting smelled of fresh coffee, and the shy sunlight streaming through the window cast shadows on the peeling walls. Despite the simple conditions, she felt strangely at peace. Her father's rejection still weighed heavily, but there was something different about that day, the feeling that her life could be rewritten. She got up, put on her worn jacket, and went downstairs to the small kitchen, where the smell of freshly baked bread filled the air. As she ate, she thought of all the opportunities she had ignored out of fear, out of insecurity, out of the belief that she would never be enough for someone who had already decided they didn't want her. But now, that feeling of helplessness seemed more distant. Clara took a deep breath and decided it was time to act. She needed to find something that was hers alone, something no one could take away, something that would prove, first to herself, that she was capable of building her own life. She picked up her notebook, that old blue-covered notebook, filled with scribbles, ideas, future plans, and began to write with a determination she hadn't felt in a long time. Each word seemed to carry a part of her heart, each line a step away from the shadow of a father who had never valued her. She then decided she would look for a better job, something that would not only pay the bills, but also bring her closer to who she wanted to be. Clara knew she could no longer depend on luck or the generosity of others. Her freedom and success needed to be earned. She called companies, sent emails, made phone calls. Each negative response was a blow, but she didn't give up. With each rejection, she felt stronger, more determined, more alive. That afternoon, walking through the city, she noticed how everything seemed clearer. The people passing by didn't know her pain, but that didn't matter. Each face was simply a reflection that the world continued, and she needed to be a part of it with courage. As she walked, Clara found a small cafe that looked like something out of an old movie, with polished wooden tables and book-lined walls. She went in, ordered a coffee, and sat by the window, watching the busy street. It was at that moment that something unexpected happened. A man, apparently her manager or investor, came in and asked for a table. He noticed her, glanced at her notebook full of ideas, and casually asked if she was involved in any projects. Clara hesitated, but something in his gaze conveyed sincerity and passion. The man smiled and said he was always looking for talented young people, determined people capable of turning ideas into reality. That brief encounter ignited a spark of hope in Clara, something she hadn't felt in years. For the first time, she realized that perhaps the world had room for her, that she didn't need her millionaire father's approval to be someone important. As she left the cafe, her heart was pounding, and a clear thought emerged in her mind. If he could believe in her in just a few minutes, she could believe in herself forever. Clara began to run, not physically, but mentally, making plans, strategies, small daily victories that would lead her to a future no one could steal. She felt she was about to begin something bigger than herself, something that would prove that rejection doesn't mean defeat, that abandonment can turn into strength, and that true wealth wasn't found in her father's money, but in the ability to fight for her own life. In the days that followed, Clara dedicated herself entirely to transforming her ideas into concrete actions. Each morning was a battle against the discouragement that sometimes insisted on returning. But she had learned that true strength comes from persistence, from continuous effort, even when no one believes in you. She began waking up earlier, reviewing her plans in her blue notebook, refining every detail, writing down goals, imagining scenarios, anticipating obstacles. With each written line, she felt a spark of power, something her father could never offer: autonomy, control over her own life. One rainy afternoon, while walking the city streets with her half-broken umbrella, Clara received an unexpected call. It was the man from the coffee shop. He had researched her background, her ideas, and wanted to schedule a meeting to talk more seriously. Clara's heart raced. She knew this was a rare, perhaps unique, opportunity. She prepared like never before, reviewing every sentence, every argument, every detail of her project. The next day, she sat across from the man, who exuded authority and experience. Clara began presenting her ideas with a passion and clarity that surprised even her. Every word was charged with emotion, every gesture conveyed conviction. The man seemed intrigued and interested, and the conversation lasted for hours. At the end, he smiled and said, "Clara, you have something many people never have: courage and vision. If you want, I can help you take the first steps." In that moment, Clara felt a mixture of disbelief and joy. She had never depended on anyone like this before, but this time was different. She was ready to seize the opportunity. Leaving the meeting, she walked with the feeling that something was finally changing, that the world might recognize her worth. But at the same time, the memory of her millionaire father surfaced in her mind, that old rejection, the pain of absence and disapproval. She took a deep breath and decided she would not allow that past to determine her future. The following week, Clara began working with the man, starting small projects, learning about business strategies, marketing, and finance. Every achievement, no matter how small, was a personal victory. She learned to handle criticism, face unexpected challenges, and find solutions when there seemed no way out. One night, while reviewing her notebook before bed, she reflected on how much she had grown in such a short time. Her father's rejection, which had previously seemed an unbearable burden, now became fuel. She realized she could be powerful on her own, that she didn't need the approval of those who didn't believe in her. And as she looked out the window at the illuminated city, Clara smiled. She had discovered something much greater than money or recognition. She discovered the strength within herself, the ability to transform pain into motivation, fear into action, rejection into determination. Every step she took was a step away from the past and closer to a future she would choose, a future built by her effort, intelligence, and courage. Clara's days began to blur between intense learning and unexpected challenges. Each morning brought a new lesson, an opportunity to prove herself capable of more than she had ever imagined. She began to notice patterns, understand the behavior of those around her, the dynamics of the business world. the importance of each decision, no matter how small. One Friday morning, she received news that would shake everything. One of her projects was on the verge of failure. The initial investment hadn't yielded as expected, and the team she worked with began to express doubts about its continuity. Clara felt the weight of discouragement, that old feeling of rejection and helplessness trying to return, but this time was different. She took a deep breath, sat at her desk with her blue notebook open, and began to write. Every problem, every possible solution, every alternative. Strategy. Her mind became a battlefield, and determination her most powerful weapon. For hours, she analyzed, planned, and replanned until a new approach emerged, adjusting the product, targeting a different audience, using social media to build anticipation, and seeking strategic partners who believed in the idea. The next day, she presented her plan to the team. Some were still skeptical, but Clara's conviction was impossible to ignore. Gradually, their perspectives changed, the energy shifted, and the project gained momentum again. The feeling of victory was intense, not just because of the momentary success, but because she had proven to herself that she was capable of facing crises alone, without relying on external approval, without waiting for the support of her father who had rejected her. That night, as she walked alone through the city's illuminated streets, she reflected on the journey she had taken. Every difficulty, every held-back tear, every moment of doubt had been transformed into learning and strength. Clara began to realize that her worth was not tied to her father's name, nor to his wealth, but to the courage, intelligence, and resilience that emerged from within. A few days later, an unexpected invitation arrived. A young entrepreneur's fair was looking for promising talent to present their projects to influential investors. Clara knew this was her chance to show the world, and herself, how much she had evolved. During preparation, she revisited every detail, every phrase, every strategy. She knew she couldn't just impress with her project. She needed to convey authenticity, emotion, strength, and determination. On the day of the fair, Clara took the stage with confidence. Every word was calculated but also charged with emotion. The audience felt her story, her struggle, her effort. When she finished, warm applause echoed through the hall. She smiled, not for external recognition, but for having proven that it was possible to transform rejection into impulse, pain into learning, fear into action. Upon returning home, she felt a mixture of exhaustion and euphoria. Her father, however absent, was no longer a shadow that dictated her worth. Clara had found her own light, and that light shone brightly, guiding every step of the path she was now determined to walk alone, but with strength, courage, and passion. The success of the Young Entrepreneurs Fair was just the beginning of a new phase in Clara's life. The energy of the stage, the attentive gaze of the audience, and the feeling of having transformed a story of rejection into inspiration propelled her forward in an overwhelming way. In the following days, contacts began to arrive, curious investors, interested journalists, and other young entrepreneurs who saw in her an example of courage and resilience. Each call, each meeting, each email made Clara realize that life was full of opportunities, but also required discipline, patience, and strategy. She began to organize her days precisely, mornings dedicated to developing new projects, afternoons to meetings and learning from mentors, evenings to reflection and planning. With each challenge, the fear that had previously paralyzed her began to dissolve, replaced by a solid confidence forged in adversity. But like every intense journey, new obstacles arose. A major investor questioned the viability of her project, raising doubts that left her uneasy. Clara felt butterflies in her stomach, that mixture of anxiety and tension that seemed to run down her spine. However, instead of retreating, she decided to embrace each criticism as an opportunity to grow. She gathered her team, discussed each point raised, adjusted strategies, and presented well-founded responses, showcasing not only the project, but also her vision, passion, and deep knowledge. With each step, Clara solidified not only her authority at work, but also her self-esteem. Her father's rejection, which had previously seemed crushing, no longer held the same power over her. One day, during a conversation with an experienced mentor, Clara shared her insecurities, memories of her father, and fears for the future. The mentor smiled, took her hand and said, "What you feel is rejection. Many would call freedom. You are free to build something greater than he could ever imagine. And that, Clara, is a privilege few have." These words resonated deeply with Clara. She began to understand that her father's absence was not a weakness, but an opportunity to become someone unique, with her own strength, without relying on anyone's validation. Months later, her life took a significant turn. The project that had nearly failed gained investment, strategic partnerships were formed, and her presence in the young entrepreneurial scene began to solidify. Each victory was accompanied by memories of the past, not as pain, but as fuel. Clara realized that her strength came not only from technical skills, but from the resilience built amid rejection and loneliness. One sunny afternoon, while reviewing progress reports in her modern office, she received an unexpected message, a letter from her father. The envelope bore the family business seal, and her heart raced. Clara took a deep breath before opening it, feeling a mixture of curiosity, nervousness, and a hint of anticipation. As she read the first few lines, she realized that her father recognized her achievements, albeit in a restrained and distant way. A mix of emotions emerged: resentment, relief, satisfaction. But what stood out was a clear feeling. Clara didn't need external approval. Every step she took, every challenge she overcame, had transformed her into someone who didn't depend on her father's love or recognition to feel whole. She smiled, put the letter aside, and returned to work. The world was full of possibilities, and the strength she found within herself was enough to face any obstacle. Clara was ready for the next phase of her life, knowing that the rejection of the past wouldn't define her future, but rather the courage with which she chose to move forward. With her initial success solidified, Clara felt she needed to expand her vision. It wasn't enough to simply create projects. She wanted to impact lives, inspire others who, like her, had been underestimated or rejected. She considered creating a mentoring program for young entrepreneurs facing similar challenges, offering guidance, resources, and motivation. The process began. Slowly, Clara used her personal experience to build a unique curriculum with practical exercises and real-life stories that showed how to turn adversity into opportunity. She dedicated herself to nights reviewing materials, adjusting plans, and ensuring every detail was carefully considered. But personal and professional growth brought new emotional challenges. As she dealt with the pressure of responsibilities, Clara began to reflect on her personal relationships. Her father's absence and the distance from her father figures left gaps she still needed to fill. There were times when loneliness weighed heavily, and memories of the past surfaced intensely, bringing doubts about her worth and capabilities. However, these reflections didn't paralyze her. On the contrary, they motivated her to strengthen bonds with people who truly mattered, friends and mentors who became her chosen family. One such defining moment occurred during a networking event. Clara was at an elegant dinner table, surrounded by other young visionaries, when a casual conversation turned into something profound. A young entrepreneur shared his own experience of family rejection and how he nearly gave up on his dreams. Clara then realized she was not alone. Her story, as painful as it was at first, now served as an example and inspiration. She stood, looking into the eyes of those present, and recounted excerpts from her journey: the abandonment by her father, the struggle to prove herself, the constant fear of failure, and finally the discovery of her own strength. Her words echoed throughout the room, eliciting emotional applause and quiet tears of recognition. Clara realized that her pain had been transformed into power. Every rejection, every doubt, and every tear became tools to inspire others to move forward. This clarity propelled her to launch her first online workshop, open to any young person who wanted to transform rejection into fuel for growth. The response was surprising. Hundreds of registrations in the first few days, emotional messages from participants who saw themselves reflected in her story, and invitations to speak at universities and entrepreneurship centers. But at the same time, success brought new pressures: people's expectations, the need to always be strong, and the fear of disappointing those who believed in her created moments of intense tension. Clara began to struggle with insomnia, doubts about every decision, and the constant feeling that she needed to do more, be more. In these moments she remembered her own journey, the times she doubted herself and yet found the strength to carry on. This habit of daily reflection became essential. Each morning began with a short meditation, reinforcing her self-confidence. Each night ended with notes on the day's learnings, strengthening her resilience. One day, while reviewing feedback from her workshop, Clara received an unexpected message from an investor who had participated in other programs, offering significant resources to expand her initiative to other countries. Excitement took over, but so did a new sense of responsibility. Clara knew she could not fail, not just for herself, but for all the young people who now placed their trust in her work. Realizing the impact her story had, Clara felt a mixture of humility and empowerment. She, the young woman who had once been rejected by her own father, now had the chance to transform lives, to be a force for positive and inspiring change. With each message of gratitude, with each story shared by someone who had found hope, Clara understood that the initial rejection, however painful, had been the first step toward discovering her true potential. And so, with determination and a firm heart, Clara moved forward, ready to face the challenges that lay ahead, knowing that her inner strength was greater than any rejection of the past. Clara woke before dawn, as she always did. The dim light streaming through the window still barely illuminated her room, but she needed nothing more. Each morning was an opportunity to write her own story, to create something greater than the past that had rejected her. As she stretched, she felt again the longing for that father who never believed in her, for the voice that never praised her efforts, for the presence that never offered protection. But this time the pain didn't paralyze her. It became fuel. She sat at the kitchen table, a simple coffee still carefully prepared, but representing discipline, focus, and independence. She opened her laptop and reviewed the workshop materials, detailing each exercise, each real-life example that could transform the fear of failure into learning. Clara knew it wasn't enough to simply teach techniques. She needed to touch hearts, to make each participant feel that their pain could be transformed into strength. As she worked, her phone vibrated. It was a message from a young woman who had participated in the first workshop, sharing how she had finally managed to start her own artisanal candy business. Clara smiled, clutching the phone tightly. Each story was like a spark of warmth in her heart, reminding her that past rejection didn't determine her future. She responded with encouraging words, detailing small adjustments, offering support and demonstrating that no one had to face difficulties alone. Later, Clara received an invitation to a young entrepreneur's event. It was a networking gala, an opportunity to showcase her work to investors, professors, and other young visionaries. As she entered the room, the chandeliers shone brightly, reflecting on tables with crisp white tablecloths and crystal glasses. Every detail exuded wealth and exclusivity, but Clara was undeterred. She felt the weight of every curious glance and every silent comment about her presence. Some whispered about the millionaire's rejected daughter, others admired her courage. But Clara wasn't there to prove anything to anyone. She was there to inspire. During the event, she was called to the stage to share her story. The room quieted, all eyes on her. Clara took a deep breath and began. She spoke about her lonely childhood, about the moments when her father's silence seemed to echo louder than any words of encouragement, about the feeling of not being enough. Every detail was narrated with raw emotion, and even when tears threatened to fall, she remained steadfast, looking out at the audience, connecting with every soul. Present. Don't let someone's rejection define who you are. Use pain as fuel, doubt as motivation, loneliness as strength, she said, to instant applause. After the presentation, several people approached Clara to talk. A young entrepreneur shared how he almost dropped out of college, believing he would never be successful. A teacher mentioned students in need of emotional and professional guidance and asked for advice on how to replicate the program in schools. A prominent investor, known for supporting young talent, offered significant funding for Clara to expand her workshops internationally. Each conversation was more than an opportunity for professional growth. It was confirmation that her pain had transformed into real impact. That night, when she finally returned home, Clara sat alone on her porch, gazing at the city lights that shone like stars reflected on the ground. She thought about her father, about the past that had hurt her, but also about the life she was now building, alone, each step guided by her determination and courage. Every obstacle, every challenge faced, every tear shed had brought her to this point of empowerment. And she knew there was still much to do, new projects, new young people to inspire, new stories to transform. Clara realized that her strength didn't come solely from her financial independence or her professional achievements, but from her ability to rebuild herself every day, to transform rejection into learning, to transform pain into passion. And that night, as the cool city wind caressed her face, she smiled confidently. The world was waiting for her, and she was ready to face it, ready to show that rejection doesn't define anyone. It's the courage to continue that makes the difference. Clara woke to the sun already high, filtering through the heavy curtains of the minimalist apartment she now called home. The smell of fresh coffee filled the kitchen as she moved with precision, each step ritualized, each action part of a routine that sustained her. Today wasn't just another day, it was a day of decision, a day in which she would once again face doubt, insecurity, and fear, feelings that, for so long, her father's abandonment had instilled in her. But Clara had learned that fear wasn't weakness, but rather a marker of where to place courage. Sitting at the table, she opened a huge notebook filled with notes from weeks, months, and even years of planning. Every line, every handwritten word, was the fruit of experience and reflection. There were details of future workshops, engagement strategies, stories of students who had inspired her, and messages of gratitude that still filled her heart with emotion. Clara ran her fingers over each page, remembering the long, sleepless nights, the hidden tears, the times she believed she was alone against the world. But now, all of it had shape, direction, and purpose. While working, a notification on her phone caught her attention. It was an invitation to participate in a television show about young entrepreneurs. The producer described the concept: "We want to show real stories of overcoming obstacles, courage, and creativity. You're perfect to inspire thousands of people." Clara felt butterflies in her stomach. Appearing on TV was a huge opportunity, but it also meant exposing old wounds, sharing vulnerability with millions of strangers. She took a deep breath and smiled, realizing that vulnerability, when used well, could be a powerful weapon. She accepted immediately. In the studio, the energy was electric. The lights, cameras, and the movement of the crew created a whirlwind of sounds, shadows, and reflections. Clara was led backstage, where other talented young people waited anxiously. Some were known in the digital world, others came from small towns, but they all shared something in common: the search for recognition, the desire to transform their lives despite insurmountable obstacles. Clara felt an immediate connection, a reminder that even alone she was never truly alone. When her turn came, the presenter greeted her with a welcoming smile. "Clara, we know your story is impressive. Tell us how you turned rejection into strength and today inspire young people around the world." Clara took a deep breath, her heart pounding. She began to recount her childhood, marked by her father's absence, every detail of silence, contempt, and disappointment. But now not just as a story, but as a learning experience. She described her first attempts to create her workshops, the financial difficulties, the days when she felt she would fail completely. As she spoke, images of her journey were projected on the screen. Clara working alone in a small room, drafting plans, talking on the phone with young participants, helping them overcome their own challenges. Each image reinforced the message of resilience. Among the stories, she inserted stories of specific students: a girl who finally managed to open her own bakery, a young man who overcame depression after participating in her programs, a couple who found motivation to start a business together. Each story was detailed, with real dialogue, intense emotions, and brief descriptions of scenarios that made the audience feel like they were part of the narrative. After recording, Clara was approached by producers and sponsors interested in financing new projects. She discussed contracts and detailed plans, but also maintained her authenticity, refusing proposals that might compromise the essence of her work. Leaving the studio, she walked through the busy city streets, observing the people, cars, and tall buildings, reflecting on the irony of it all. Rejected by those who should have supported her most, she now inspired strangers and gained international recognition. At home that night, Clara reviewed every detail of the recording, watching her own narrative come to life on the screen. She smiled, but soon found herself thinking about her father, that man who never saw her worth, who never believed she could be strong, independent, and influential. There was no anger, just a clear realization that the past could no longer hold her back. She was free from the invisible chains of rejection, and the freedom tasted sweet and intense, almost like the aroma of coffee still perfuming the kitchen. In the following days, Clara began planning an international trip to expand the workshops. Each chosen destination had a purpose. London, New York, Paris, cities where young talent could be discovered and nurtured. Each plan included meticulous details, from transportation logistics to hotel and conference room selection, digital marketing strategies, and inspiring content planning. Clara transformed every challenge into an opportunity, every obstacle into a learning experience, and every doubt into motivation. During a virtual meeting with an international team, Clara realized how much she had evolved. Before, any criticism or difficulty would leave her discouraged. Now she sought solutions, developed strategies, and connected with each person with empathy and determination. The respect she felt when dealing with young entrepreneurs from different countries reinforced her sense that she had found her true purpose, not only to overcome her father's rejection, but to create a legacy that would impact lives, inspiring courage, creativity, and independence. That night, Clara sat on her balcony again, looking out at the illuminated city. Each light seemed to represent a possibility, each street a story. She thought of how many lives she could touch, how many young people could transform pain into strength, how many could discover that rejection is not a sentence. She felt her father's presence not as a threat, but as a reminder of how much she needed herself to create a fulfilling future. And she smiled, a smile full of strength, determination, and hope, ready to embrace the challenges ahead with courage and conviction. The soft sound of rain tapping on the window brought a sense of introspection to Clara that morning. She sat at her desk, now cluttered with papers, notebooks, laptops, and notes, each item representing weeks of planning and execution. The aroma of herbal tea wafted through the apartment, mingling with the subtle smell of wet concrete from the city outside. Clara took a deep breath, realizing how every detail of her life, every choice, and every hardship had shaped her. The rejection from her millionaire father that had marked her childhood was now becoming fuel for her personal and professional growth. As she reviewed her international expansion plans, her phone rang. It was Marina, a young entrepreneur who had attended her workshops since the very first edition. "Clara, I can't even thank you enough," Marina said, her voice thick with emotion. "I finally managed to launch my own startup, and a lot of that is because of you." Clara smiled, feeling the warmth of human connection that motivated her every day. She knew that each of her students' success stories was also a reflection of her own inner strength, proof that every scar of rejection could transform into a mark of resilience. The day passed with meetings, video calls, and detailed planning for upcoming trips. Clara developed digital marketing strategies for her workshops in London and New York, discussed ways to engage different audiences on social media and social networks, and even evaluated potential partners and sponsors who could help expand her reach. Every decision was made carefully, and every word in her messages was crafted to convey authenticity, courage, and motivation. Late that afternoon, Clara received an unexpected invitation, a formal letter from her father's lawyer, informing her that he had become aware of her growing influence and success and was willing to meet to discuss possible reconciliation and financial support. For a moment, a whirlwind of emotions coursed through her. Anger, curiosity, anxiety, childhood memories. But Clara took a deep breath and felt something deeper. The clarity that she was now in control of her own story. She could choose to accept, confront, or simply move on, without depending on those who had rejected her. She decided the meeting would be simply a time to observe, learn, and strengthen herself, without giving in to external pressure. On the appointed day, Clara entered her father's luxurious office, a glass tower that reflected the city and the grey sky. Her father greeted her with a restrained smile, trying to balance cordiality with power. "Clara, you've grown a lot," he said, trying to hide his surprise and perhaps a hint of pride. Clara remained firm, responding only with a calm smile. This was no time for long discussions or rehashing old wounds. It was time to reaffirm her own strength and independence. During the meeting, her father tried to propose some conditions for offering financial assistance, but Clara calmly and clearly explained her plan. She didn't need money to validate her capabilities. She was building everything herself, with her own effort, creativity, and purpose. Every sentence she spoke was filled with determination. Every gesture conveyed confidence. The father, surprised, realized that the young woman he had underestimated was no longer the fragile girl she once was, but a complete woman, capable of making strategic decisions and significantly impacting lives. After the meeting, Clara returned to her apartment feeling lighter and even more confident. She realized that the strength she sought came not from her father's approval, nor from money or status, but from her own courage, her persistence in facing challenges, and her ability to transform pain into learning. She sat on the balcony again, observing the city, now in the dim light of dusk, reflecting on each step of the journey thus far, each achievement of her students, each positive feedback, each small victory added up to the great realization of her emotional and financial independence. In the following days, Clara intensified her preparations for the international trip. She studied maps, plotted routes, detailed logistics, and rehearsed presentations for her workshops. To each planning step, she added inspiring stories of her own challenges, real-life examples of resilience, and motivational exercises to empower the young participants. She transformed every detail into a narrative, every step into a learning experience, and every experience into strength for others. During an online meeting with international partners, Clara was approached by a young man from Paris who wanted to share his own story of overcoming adversity. He had faced family rejection and extreme financial hardship, but his words revealed an intense desire to change his life. Clara listened attentively, asked detailed questions, offered advice, and above all, exuded confidence. She realized that by helping others find strength amid adversity, she further cemented her own personal power, transforming each encounter into an opportunity for mutual growth. That night, as she reviewed the final details of her projects and thank you notes, Clara received a letter from a London school confirming her participation in an international program for young entrepreneurs. She felt a surge of emotion and pride, knowing that her journey was not just about overcoming the past, but about building bridges so that others could build better futures. Every word written, every plan devised, every decision made carried the strength of someone who had faced rejection, pain, and abandonment, yet still transformed it all into achievement, inspiration, and hope. The morning began with a sky painted in golden and orange hues, reflecting on the streets damp from the previous night's rain. Clara was in her apartment, meticulously reviewing every detail of the upcoming international workshop. Her agenda was packed. Individual mentoring sessions, lectures, meetings with potential investors and partners, and interviews with international media. She knew that every step needed to be planned precisely, as every detail impacted not only her image, but also the trust of those who followed her work and were inspired by her story. While preparing the slides for her keynote presentation, Clara received a message from her younger brother, Lucas, who lived with their mother in another city. He wanted to share updates about his own personal and academic growth. Clara smiled, remembering how, despite family differences, each genuine connection brought strength and reminders of who she truly was. She felt a renewed sense of certainty that family isn't limited to blood ties, but to the people we choose to support, trust, and inspire. The following afternoon, Clara participated in a video conference with a renowned startup accelerator in New York. She presented her project in detail, addressing every risk, every growth potential, and every lesson learned throughout her journey. The investors' questions were intense and challenging, demanding quick, well-founded, and persuasive answers. Every word Clara spoke reflected confidence, clarity, and above all, practical experience. In the end, the investors congratulated her, not only on the idea, but on the way she had transformed rejection and adversity into strength and leadership. Leaving her apartment for an in-person meeting with a potential sponsor, Clara walked through the city's busy streets. She observed every detail: shop windows, hurried people, smiles, and weary expressions. For her, each small urban scene was an opportunity for inspiration. She reflected on how each person carried their own struggles, and how important it was to recognize the strength each person possessed, even when the world seemed cruel or indifferent. At the luxurious cafe where she met with the sponsor, Clara saw a parallel with her own story. The spacious table, the elegant chairs, the attentive waiters, everything reflected success and status. But Clara wasn't fooled by luxury. Her focus was on dialogue, on building a genuine connection, on demonstrating that inner strength and authenticity were more valuable than any superficial wealth. The sponsor was impressed by her maturity, planning, and communication skills, confirming that she had not only survived her millionaire father's rejection, but was now capable of inspiring and leading others on a global scale. During dinner that night, Clara received an unexpected call from a former schoolmate who now managed an international social project. She wanted Clara to participate as a mentor, helping young people in vulnerable situations. Clara felt a mixture of excitement and responsibility. She accepted immediately, recognizing that true strength comes not only from personal achievements, but from the ability to transform lives through knowledge, support, and example. As she wrote notes and plans for the social project, Clara reflected on the past. Every rejection, every frustration, every moment of solitude had been transformed into learning, empathy, and motivation. She realized that her power lay in not limiting herself to what others expected of her, but in creating her own narrative, expanding horizons and offering opportunities to those in need. Each letter, each message of encouragement, each workshop she attended became a milestone of transformation, not only for others, but for herself. Over the weekend, Clara decided to revisit her old neighborhood where she had spent much of her childhood. She walked streets that carried memories of difficult days, confronting memories of abandonment and rejection. However, instead of sadness, she felt gratitude. Every emotional scar had been a catalyst for her growth. Each step along familiar streets was now an affirmation of power. She was no longer defined by her father's abandonment, but by the strength she had built on her own, the impact she had on the world, and the ability to transform pain into purpose. Before going to sleep, Clara sat by the window, watching the city lights reflecting in the puddles. She felt a deep peace, but also a vibrant energy, ready to be channeled in the coming days. She knew the journey was far from over. New challenges, new encounters, and new opportunities awaited. But above all, Clara had learned the most important lesson. True strength does not depend on anyone's approval or recognition, but on the courage to face life, the perseverance in creating opportunities, and the commitment to transform each experience into learning and a positive impact. The morning began with a soft light streaming through the curtains of Clara's apartment, creating a pattern of shadows on the floor that resembled intertwined paths, symbolizing her own journey. She woke with a sense of anticipation, as if something grand was about to happen. She had worked tirelessly in recent weeks, balancing international meetings, lectures, mentoring, and her involvement in the social project she loved so much. Each activity seemed to fit into an invisible choreography, where each movement led to an opportunity for growth and transformation. Clara decided to start the day by revisiting old diaries, records from her adolescence, and notes on plans she had made as a young woman. Leafing through the pages, she recalled moments of rejection from her father, inner doubts, and nights when she questioned her own worth. But at the same time, she realized how each hardship had planted seeds of resilience. She saw that even without family support, she had managed to build a solid foundation of self-confidence, empathy, and strategic vision. Every tear, every moment of doubt, had been converted into strength and clarity of purpose. During lunch, she received an unexpected call from an investor who had followed her work since the early days of her startup. He urgently wanted a face-to-face meeting, expressing interest in investing a significant amount for international expansion. Clara felt a wave of excitement mixed with responsibility. She knew this investment could open doors to transform thousands of lives through her projects, but it also required rigorous planning, courage to make risky decisions, and the ability to maintain her integrity and original vision intact. On the way to the meeting, Clara reflected on the past few years. Each step now seemed part of a larger plan, a narrative that connected her childhood marked by rejection, her solitary efforts to assert herself, and the positive impact she was making on those around her. She realized that her father's rejection, which once seemed an insurmountable obstacle, had become a catalyst for her own autonomy, emotional intelligence, and leadership skills. The meeting with the investor took place in a modern building with panoramic views of the city. Every detail of the space, glass walls, minimalist, furniture, contemporary artwork, seemed to reflect the magnitude of the decisions to be made. Clara presented her vision precisely, articulating numbers, projections, goals, and, most importantly, the mission of her work. The investor was impressed, not only by the planning, but by the narrative of overcoming obstacles and resilience that permeated every word. He saw not only a promising startup, but a leader capable of inspiring others, even in the face of the most intense adversity. Leaving the building, Clara took a deep breath, feeling the cool wind brush against her face. Each breath seemed to carry renewed energy, inner strength, and conviction. She knew she was about to enter the most challenging and, at the same time, most rewarding phase of her journey, transforming all the pain of the past into real, recognized, and lasting impact. Back at the apartment, Clara received an unexpected message from her father. The message was brief, fraught with hesitation, but with a tone of belated recognition. He said something that, though timid, touched Clara, an acknowledgement of her strength, courage, and success. Instead of resentment, Clara felt a mixture of empathy and serenity. She understood that while forgiveness or reconciliation weren't mandatory, the acceptance that she had overcome her difficulties on her own was liberating. That night, Clara hosted a special dinner on her balcony overlooking the illuminated city. She invited close friends, mentors, and collaborators who had followed her journey closely. Every conversation, every laugh, every shared experience reinforced the sense of accomplishment and connection. Clara realized she had built a genuine support network based on respect, trust, and mutual admiration. More than financial success, she now had a human legacy. Before going to sleep, Clara sat by the window again, looking out over the city. She felt a mixture of nostalgia and anticipation. Every challenge overcome, every difficult choice, every moment of doubt had been essential to getting here. But she knew there was still one final step to take, the consolidation of everything she had built, the closure of her story of overcoming adversity, and the delivery of a powerful message to those who followed her journey. She took a deep breath and closed her eyes, knowing that the final chapter of her story was about to be written, and that the emotional impact, strategic conclusion, and human outcome would be even more intense than anything she had experienced before. The stage was set for the ending everyone expected, but few could have imagined in its depth and emotional beauty. Dawn brought with it a golden light that bathed Clara's apartment, reflecting off every polished surface and creating an almost cinematic ambience. She woke feeling a mixture of tranquility and excitement, aware that this day would mark the culmination of years of effort, pain, overcoming, and growth. Every challenge faced, every tear shed, every moment of doubt and fear was now transformed into fuel for the apex of her journey. Clara took a deep breath and looked out the window, the city slowly awakening below, as if the entire universe were aligned to witness her silent yet powerful victory. She began the day revisiting her routine, but with renewed purpose. Every task, phone calls, strategic meetings, investment decisions, and social project planning now had a profound meaning that transcended numbers or financial results. Each action was an affirmation of her autonomy, courage, and inner strength. Clara realized that her true legacy lay not in the wealth she could accumulate, but in the real difference she would make in the lives of thousands of people who believed in her leadership and vision. That afternoon she received an unexpected visitor. Her father, the man who had rejected her so many years ago, stood before her, now older, visibly remorseful, the weight of the past evident in his gaze. Clara received him with a firm but ungrudging demeanor. She had evolved beyond the need for family approval or validation. The encounter was fraught with tension, emotion, and vulnerability. Her father, with a trembling voice, admitted his mistakes, his failings, and the distance he had imposed for years. Clara, in turn, didn't apologize but demonstrated compassion and understanding, reflecting the maturity she had gained throughout her life. Next, Clara dedicated herself to one final major step, consolidating the impact of her work and message. She organized a charity event, bringing together influencers, investors, mentors, and community members who had benefited from her projects. Each speech, each shared story, each testimony reinforced the magnitude of her journey. Clara realized she had become a reference not only in leadership or financial success, but also in resilience, courage, and empathy. The emotion that permeated the event was so intense that many were moved to tears, feeling the power of the narrative of overcoming adversity and personal transformation. As the sun set, Clara took the stage for her final speech. The city in the background, illuminated by thousands of lights, seemed to reflect her own journey. Brilliant, challenging, full of ups and downs, but undeniably victorious. She spoke with clarity, emotion, and authority, reminding everyone present that true strength emerges from moments of adversity, that rejection or failure do not define one's worth, and that the courage to stand alone when necessary can be the key to extraordinary achievement. The climax of the speech came when Clara revealed that the social project she had started with her own resources and strategic investments would reach thousands of people, providing education, opportunities, and emotional support. She emphasized that, more than material wealth, her goal was to create lasting and meaningful transformation. The audience erupted in applause, tears, and gratitude, recognizing not only Clara's success, but also the inner strength that guided her to this point. After the event, Clara returned to her apartment. Alone but filled with fulfillment, she looked at old photos, memories of her childhood marked by rejection, and smiled serenely. Every difficulty she faced, every step she took alone, had become a narrative of personal and collective victory. She understood that the true meaning of power and success lies not in external validation, but in the ability to overcome obstacles, maintain integrity, and positively impact the lives of others. Before going to sleep, Clara wrote a message to her followers and supporters, an invitation to believe in themselves, overcome adversity, and transform pain into strength. She ended the message with a call to action, asking them to comment on their own stories of overcoming adversity, subscribe to the channel to follow more inspiring stories, and share the message so more people could be inspired. Clara knew that her journey was not just personal, but a bridge of inspiration for thousands of lives. As she closed her journal, the last sentence she wrote echoed her entire journey. Rejection may have shaped me, but it will never define my strength. Alone or with others, I am capable of creating my own destiny, and my story is just the beginning of something greater. With one last look at the illuminated city, Clara smiled, complete, knowing she had reached the pinnacle of her personal, emotional, and strategic evolution. The cycle was complete, but the story that would inspire so many would continue to reverberate.